I'm Catherine Arndt, the Chief of the VLGA Connect studio. Welcome to today's episode, brought to you by the VLGA, your counsellor support network and the national broadcaster on all things local government.
Hi everyone, welcome to the weekly governance update from VLGA Connect. We call it TGU, and it's brought to you by Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. And from Hunt and Hunt Lawyers, I'm pleased to have Tony Raunic with me this week. Hi Tony.
G'day Chris.
How you going?
Oh, good. Another
good.
busy week. A lot of LG Pro things this week with the conference.
We might get a bit of intelligence from you on how that went. And Julie Reid is joining us from Julie A. Reid and Associates. And you've been a bit under the weather, Julie, so we really appreciate you joining us. I know what it's like.
Yeah. Hello to both of you. Yes, no, unfortunately, it's been a rough couple of weeks for me. But anyway, I'm just about back on deck.
Well, I'm glad that you're with us, which hopefully does mean you're on the right side of it. This bug that I've had has taken a long time to shake, so I hope you do better with it than I have. Big week, of course, Victorian State Budget Week. Lots of reaction from councils and sector bodies, advocacy groups, etc. We'll take a look at that in just a moment. You did mention it's also the week of the LG Pro Conference and dinner. First one that I've missed for a while. Probably wouldn't have gone feeling the way I've been feeling, and I'm pretty sure you wouldn't have been there last night, Julie, but I think Tony might have put an appearance in.
Yeah, I did get to the pre-dinner drinks last night. Didn't do the dinner for first time for a while, but new venue this year was at the Sofitel on Collins, and congrats to Leanna Thompson, President Jill Brown, the CEO, and the whole team there at LG Pro. I think another really fabulous event, really well attended throughout the week, and great to catch up again last night and the night before with lots of local government people just in the room, and to chat about things like the budget it's been released and other things going on in the sector.
I was a bit sad to miss it, Chris, because I was under the weather. I managed to get to the opening session on the first day and the second session, which was on the culture review. So that was a really interesting panel discussion that Leanna Thompson drove, and really interesting input from Mark Hayes from Maddox, and also a panel of people, some from interstate. So that was interesting, but at that stage I just died and had to go home.
Sorry to hear that, but good to get that little bit of intelligence. The new venue works well?
Yeah, I thought so. What do you think, Jill?
Yeah, I thought it was really nice, and it was it had a good vibe, good feel to it. It's
been a long time since it's been held at a different venue, other than the COVID period, of course. So well done to the LG Pro team, terrific team. They really punch above their weight at LG Pro, and I'm sure it's been a great success. Looking forward to hearing about all the award winners. I haven't seen that list yet, and that's probably my fault because I haven't gone looking for it. It'll be around somewhere, and we might talk about that maybe next week, or at least on the roundup. So it has been all about the budget this week, winners and losers as always. We've had some ticks and some concerns issued by the MAV. We've had Regional Cities Victoria responding, Rural Councils Victoria responding, a big cut to the Growing Suburbs Fund. So there are probably some headline issues. Start with you, Julie. Have you noted anything in particular about this budget and its impact on local government?
Yeah, I was interested to see, Chris, that they have cut the Growing Suburbs Fund, and I know there's been a bit of press about that yesterday. Reduced from 50 million down to just 10 million. When I was in LGV, it was starting to get to that point where we thought that it was maybe under a bit of threat. I expected this was going to come at some stage. It's a real shame because I think there is going to be a big impact. We heard from the Hume Mayor, I think it was yesterday on the ABC News, and some communities saying that they were not happy about the decision. It's a real blow to local government, and the growing suburbs. So that's one thing that I did notice. I was really pleased to see an additional 15.7 million on top of the base funding for schools crossing supervisor funding. And I thought, yahoo! There's people that have made a stand on this issue from local government, and it's obviously had some impact. So that's good. And I think we need to see more of this coming from local government, a stand on some of these serious issues of where cost shifting has occurred over a number of years, which has had a really big impact on local government.
I wonder, Julie, and I haven't seen anything in detail on this, how far that additional 15.7 million will go. And I noticed with the MAV, it's in the plus column and the cons column because it's only a one-year commitment at this point.
Yeah, it is only 1 year commitment, but at least it's in there. I think that what I saw somewhere was that it was going to bring it back to a 50-50 split between local government and state government. So that's at least better than where it was. Now it's up to councils to continue to push, to put pressure on that continuing.
Tony, any particular issue with the budget that's jumped out at you?
Look, I think just generally it's probably disappointingly light on for the sector at a time when, the sector's in, particular need of support. To be fair, the government, there are some of those bright spots. I think the other a couple we didn't mention is the early years infrastructure support with the, the rollout of the 3-year-old kinder reforms. There's another, 1.2 billion for, I think, about 100 new kindergartens, mainly sort of co-located or located near government schools to get rid of that, the dreaded double drop-off syndrome that parents have. But other than that, and I think some additional money towards apprenticeships and traineeships at councils. A lot of the story is, the ongoing cost shift continuing, the ongoing sort of under budgeting, lack of support from the state government for those shared funded programs, and
like libraries, for example, which I know the MAV points out it's now down in real terms to 17% funded by the state.
Yeah, it's only 17%. And Jim McGee, the mayor of Glen Ira, who's a leading voice in the sector, calling for an end to this cost shift. I mean, he's called on the state government to honour the 1973 agreement it was that there'll be a 50-50 share of costs with libraries. He's pointed out in a statement this week on the Glen Ira website that they've received only 22% of the agreed funding levels for libraries at Glen Ira, and he's certainly continuing his very strong voice for more government support for councils here.
Now, tell me, am I being a little bit overly sensitive and precious here? I noticed the minister, I think is it Minister for Suburban Development, Ros Spence, in talking about the growing suburbs funding of 10 million, no mention obviously in the quote about it being reduced from 50 million, but I thought it was a bit of a whack at councils when she said there are still 150 projects to be delivered by councils and our focus will be on ensuring that those projects get delivered, projects funded under the Growing Suburbs Fund. It made it sound like, and this is perhaps just my interpretation, we're not going to give them any money, more money because they haven't delivered the stuff that they've been funded to do in the first place.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, as we know, that particular fund focuses on interface and peri-urban councils, so sort of those outer suburbs where the real growth is in Melbourne, but it's no news to anyone that there are a lot of delays in capital works and in infrastructure because of issues with people resources, with all the infrastructure projects the state government's doing, and also with inflation. So I think it's a bit unfair to point out that some of those projects are delayed when many of the state government's projects are well behind too.
Yeah, and I can comment on that as well, Chris. I mean, I know that when I was in the chair, that there were times when there were challenges with some councils being able to deliver the full program, and they did have delays, but they were very few. very few councils in that space. Most of the councils were very, very good at trying to keep on top of it and also reporting regularly. There was a very, very strong reporting mechanism and staff that were checking in regularly with the councils to make sure that they were being delivered. So it is highly regulated. And I do believe that there have been mostly, I can't say it's 100% of the circumstances, but mostly councils were or had good reasons why things were delayed. And we know that it has been very difficult, particularly with the cost escalations as well. So, yeah, look, disappointing, I suppose, in that respect. But, yeah, a bit of a blow to local government, and probably it may be an unfair criticism. I don't know, but councils do need to focus on delivery of their capital programs, and particularly where there's funding involved.
Yeah.
The other comment, Chris, in this whole budget process is that it is brutal going in and, reporting on and justifying why local government Victoria want this budget to be funded. The team in there do a really awesome job in justifying and defending and pushing hard, and it's a pretty cutthroat process. So hats off to LGV, because I know that they try really, really hard to get as much as they can for the sector.
That's really good perspective. Thank you, Julie. Down in Gippsland, some mixed reports, particularly Wellington Shire. The mayor there has come out very strongly with a scathing assessment of the decision to phase out native timber logging from, I think it's the end of this year, so basically from 2024 onwards, calling it a dark day for the community. The futures of over 650 timber workers in the Shire devastated by the announcement. A bit further towards the city in Latrobe, Kelly O'Callaghan, the mayor there, has commented on that as being a concern, obviously, for workers, and a reason why the establishment of the new State Electricity Commission should be fast-tracked to perhaps offset those job losses. So big issue for that part of the state.
Yeah, understandable. I think that those councils would come out and call for more support for what's a key local industry for them, and that's in transition. I think that there wasn't certainly awareness that native logging would be would end. Originally the date I think was 2030, and now the state budget's moved that end date forward to the 1st of January 2024. So as you say, big implications for places like Wellington Shire, where I believe that Mayor Ian Bye has said 650 jobs affected in that shire. You mentioned Latrobe. They've got the Merri-bek mill, which is the last paper manufacturing mill in the country, near sort of Traralgon Morwell, that will shut down 200 jobs. So clearly, I think those local communities were well aware that this was looming, but the criticism by the councils has been around a lack of consultation about the accelerating that move, that phasing out,
and the justification for it, like the evidence upon which the decision's been based. I think that's the point the Wellington Shire Mayor has made, that there's been no, in his view, transparency around how the decision's been arrived at.
Yeah, and he's the mayor there, as you say, a very strong statement, describes it as a kick in the guts for his community. But I think it for those rural and regional areas, it's just another an extra issue when they're faced with the big gap of funding with the roads infrastructure, and that's a big theme in the budget. I think that whilst we've seen 50 million going into local roads, there's a $300 million gap there in terms of repairing roads and road infrastructure, particularly after the flooding events of last year. And I think rural councils, Victoria, have come out with a statement saying, that under the state government's funding levels, there's going to be 29% less road maintenance than was anticipated, or the target level. So that works out to quite a bit. It's something like 3.6 million square metres of road maintenance that won't be undertaken. A lot of that's in the rural parts of the state.
I was talking to Wellington Shire recently, and they're doing some great work down there around renewable energy planning, and the offshore wind opportunities that are growing down in that part of the world are significant. They are really making a huge dent in that space, and so I think that should be recognised, and I think some of the great work they're doing in that space will hold them in good stead. So if I could just mention that, I know that things are really tough for them around the other issues and the loss of 650 jobs, but the renewable energy planning that they're doing down there is pretty amazing. So they're leaders really, I think, in the field.
Yes, and at some point you've got to look to, well, what else can we do? What's the future hold? As La Trobe's got that transition plan because these changes have been coming for a long time. I think the point at Wellington is that they didn't expect it this soon. I think the original timeline was sort of 2030, so it's probably been a bit of a shock as well. Perhaps enough on that. Good point about the Rural Council's Victoria observation on roads, Tony. Regional Cities Victoria has also made some observations on the budget, welcoming some of it, some of the stuff that we've already talked about, but also raising the spectre of support for the Commonwealth Games. It's not that far away now in 2026. There's no commitment in this budget for it, and the state says that's because they're still talking to the federal government about quantifying federal government support for it. The federal government says it's not quantifiable at this time, so it's feeling like a bit of a stalemate, isn't it? While regional councils are saying there's all this infrastructure that needs to be delivered, we're only, 3 years away now.
Yeah, and long lead times normally for, planning, design and building of those major projects in places like, Geelong, Ballarat, Shepparton, Bendigo, etc., where they're planning to hold events. So, yeah, real conundrum for those regional councils in terms of, do they commence their planning for those upgrades or wait further announcements from state and federal government.
And as we've heard from councils like Greater Geelong, financial challenges anyway, without needing to put money into this, obviously concerns about how that's going to happen. Just on Geelong, I forgot to put this on the list. The library saga had another twist this week when there was a particularly contentious council meeting where people were trying to get into the gallery to ask questions about the libraries, which wasn't on the agenda, and the questions weren't taken, and the mayor tried to keep some decorum in the gallery. I believe there's lots of catcalling and interjecting, and it's generated a bit of media this week. Have either of you seen that?
I did see those reports, and as we've commented in the past, it's understandable that there's a very sort of emotive response to this library closure issue, but we just continue to condemn anything that disrupts a council meeting.
Yeah.
But look, I also did hear in the reports, of course, that I think those libraries that were mooted for closure, in fact, won't be closed, and
that's right.
The new library coming on stream, the Armstrong Creek Library, will sort of, its opening is being held off by a year or two. Yeah.
Yes, I couldn't remember, Tony, whether we had that info on our last episode. It might have actually come out late Friday that the two groups, the council and the corporation, had met and agreed that the libraries wouldn't be closed, but there'd be some other cuts in terms of opening hours, etc.
They're talking about closing on Sundays and maybe having shorter hours during the week to compensate for it. But yeah, there's a significant shortfall in funding for them that they need to try and claw back on.
Last week on the program, Tony, you called quite strongly for legislative intervention into this issue of disruptions of council meetings, and to give councils, I guess, another tool to be able to deal with that. I ran that as a feature piece on the Local Government News Roundup as well on the weekend. I'm not sure if we've had any response, have we? Has your phone been ringing off the hook?
No, it hasn't. I haven't had a call from the Attorney General yet.
No.
But I'll hopefully, maybe he's forgotten my mobile number. It's on the Hunt and Hunt website. Look it up.
Very good. All right. Tony, I know a story that's caught your eye is a planning matter in Merri-bek that's been called in by the Minister.
Yeah. People will be aware of perhaps the Princes Park motor inn is this as a site there in Brunswick. It was a subject of an application considered by Merri-bek Council last year from the big developer Merri-bek for multiple apartments. I think 168 apartments and some commercial space. Lots of objections. I think 1,700 objections received by Merri-bek Council to that proposal, which also affects that there's a heritage listed electricity substation on the site. Council refused or rejected the plans, and in news that's just come out, that's been a call in by the Planning Minister, Sonia Kilkenny. She has overruled the council and approved that fairly major development there in Brunswick, obviously contrary to the views of those that significant number of objectors and the majority of councillors there at Merri-bek.
One to keep an eye on. I'm not sure if the council's responded yet, but I'm sure there'll be a response of some sort.
I think the trend is that we're going to see more of this, particularly in those inner suburban areas where there's a desperate need for more housing, and I think we will see intervention more frequently from the minister. That's my guess.
I think you're right, Julie, and I think we're seeing that in other jurisdictions as well. There's a real, almost a standoff happening around local community expectations and that broader issue of trying to deliver more social and affordable housing in particular, but housing in general. Another topic that's doing the rounds this week is decisions around what to do on January 26th. We've had 2 more councils this week make a decision, or in the past week, to move away from what we've been calling, obviously, Australia Day celebrations. I'm talking about Strathbogie and Greater Geelong again. Greater Geelong's getting more than its fair share of news print lately.
Yeah, I saw Greater Geelong have said they're going to permanently cease, referring to January 26th as Australia Day, and I think they've already had determined, or at least they have determined now, that that their citizenship ceremonies will be held on different days. And as you mentioned, Strathbogie is another recent council to come, recently coming out, making a similar announcement. I think it just generally reflecting a community mood to perhaps shift away from a celebration or on a date that has particular sort of significance for our Indigenous communities as symbolising, the arrival of the First Fleet, meaning the arrival of invaders, a loss of culture, and I just hope that in time that Australia will gravitate around another day that is a day we can celebrate our history, but also remember some of the issues of our past and bring us all together on a day that's a less divisive day, perhaps.
Most of these councils are also saying something along the lines of lobbying for a change of date, as you say, Tony. Julie, I've noticed that in most of these cases too, the decision comes after quite a long period of consultation, particularly with First Nations people. Yeah,
it has. And look, I think that councils are becoming much more aware of their impact in this space. And I think, you've got to look at the fact that the voice to Parliament is coming up soon. It's being discussed a lot in the media. There's lots of publicity around this, and I think that possibly this is something that's potentially influencing councils going down that particular space. But there's the build-up of those relationships, those more respectful relationships with our First Nations people, is going to change people's ideas and perceptions over time, and I think that's what's generally happening.
All right, let's move on and quickly look at a few other stories before we wrap up. Congratulations this week to Brett Luxford, the CEO at Mitchell Shire. I think Brett went there in 2020. Must have been a middle of COVID commencement for Brett. It's been announced this week that he's been put onto a new contract, or will be, of 4 years. So that'll extend Brett's term considerably at Mitchell Shire. So well done there. And Julie, have you got any intelligence on what's happening with the others? I noticed City of Melbourne's advertising. City of Stonington's been quiet for a while.
Yeah, it has been quiet for a while, but I've heard on the grapevine it's getting really close. So watch out for an announcement of that one soon. But Melbourne, Melbourne's going to be an interesting one. I know that they're on the hunt at the moment. I think that's been led by Fisher leadership. And so they're looking for a star performer to come in to take over the reins at City of Melbourne. So we're all watching that one with bated breath.
And Greater Geelong for that matter too. So there's, as you know, I keep a running tally, and there's 3 at the top of the list to be determined: Melbourne, Greater Geelong, and Stonington. And nice to see this trend of a lot of reappointments in the last few months. So, steady as she goes for many councils. Elections next year. This caught my eye. It's an introduction to being a councillor session that's being run by a couple of Greens councillors from Yarra and Darebin. That's Sophie Wade and Suzanne Newton, who I think I'm right in saying is on the VLGA board. They are getting in early. There's a information session for people interested to know more coming up at the end of this month and next week, in fact. So that's well over 12 months out.
You've got to get in early, got to get your profile up, prospective councillors, and great idea to be out there promoting the opportunity for people to run and influence their local community and have a say. I think great idea.
I think absolutely, I agree, and a lot of attention needs to be given to building awareness amongst potential candidates of what the role entails and what they're taking on. Because Julie and Tony, I've noted a bit of a trend in recent resignations of councillors. There's been a few. Just last week, the deputy mayor at the borough of Queenscliff resigned and made a statement about the increasing demands on time, on the role of being a councillor, demands of the community, etc. And she's not the first to point out that it's actually becoming challenging to juggle the role with other commitments, which, Julie, I think is a real concern about people's understanding of what the role entails.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was really clear from the culture review even that the government undertook, that there was a clear message from that there needed to be enhanced training, better training before people came in as councillors so they really understood their role. I think what we heard from one of the other states at the LG Pro conference the other day, that there were, I think, 5 or 6 mandatory modules that were required to be done by the councillors before they stepped in or run for council. So I think that there's no doubt that needs to be beefed up and it needs to be mandatory. Not an hour session online is not going to cut it. It needs to be far more detailed. And look, it's just something that I feel for these councils, because it is a pretty tough gig, and we need to be able to support them through their time as councillors to make sure that they have the best success. So it's not just that training up front, it's about the support for them throughout their time as councillors as well. And I know the community leadership program that's going on, that LGV rolled out with government, that was meant to try and entice and encourage more women in particular to step into that role. We don't want to be seeing people criticising the role and stepping away like what the deputy mayor did at Queenscliff Borough, because it's really going to put other people off actually running for council. We want them to be encouraged to run if they know that they're going to get the support that they need.
Spot on. Point really well made, Julie. That's what's been exercising my mind as well. Let's bring this into land with our picks of the week. Tony, you've been writing love letters to trees, I hear.
Oh, you didn't realise I was a hopeless romantic, did you, Chris and Julie? But I definitely am. And this story caught my eye about the City of Melbourne's urban forest project. So over a decade ago, in 2012, City of Melbourne, she set up email addresses for every council-owned tree in the municipality. And an
individual email address for each tree?
Correct. So each tree is given a number and has an email address. And the logic was it was to assist with maintenance and logging maintenance requests and these sorts of things. But this project took a life of its own, Chris and Julie, where people started to write these poetic and loving emails to their favourite trees. And according to Councillor Rowan Leppert, this week, he says that even now, over 10 years later, City of Melbourne get about 3 emails a week to trees. So can I read you out?
Oh, please do. Please do.
Don't get too emotional about this, but dear tree number 1517937, I'm confessing something very dear to me. I have fallen in love with tree number 1583182. I feel so guilty for cheating. I honestly feel really bad. I don't know what to do. That's from some loving tree admirer. So
it's a 2-timing tree loving.
But you've got to love it. Not only the environmental benefits, but the social benefits, the health and well-being that trees can bring. You've got to say, you've got to sort of take your hat off to that and say, there's probably more benefits to trees than what we actually thought.
I reckon we can up that average that Rowan Leppert mentioned of 3 a week, given our podcast. And I can see lots of emails coming in from our viewers to their favourite trees.
Excellent. There we go. So please do that and let us know that you've done that so that we can in fact copy us in if you don't mind. Julie, you've got a tree story also for you.
I had to jump on the back of Tony's tree story, and I was looking for tree stories, and I found one in Plymouth Council in the United Kingdom, in England. Yeah. They've been criticised for felling trees because of antisocial behaviour activities that are happening in the town of Plymouth.
Family program, Julie, remember? Family program.
I know. Yes, it is. And I won't tell you what kind of antisocial behaviour things have been happening.
They're just climbing them, aren't they? What are they doing?
But, their chiefs of the council are now in this really, terrible situation where they're trying to stop antisocial behaviour. They're cutting down these trees and they're really upsetting the community. The community is saying, stop it. Apparently, they've already felled about 110 mature trees in the city centre. And along the waterfront as well. So they're causing some really heated debate in Plymouth. So look, it's a really interesting debate around, the benefit of trees and then the issues that councils face on a day-to-day basis, the complaints around antisocial behaviour. What do you do in a circumstance like that?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure the answer is to remove the trees. I'm not sure that that's actually dealing with the problem, but I guess that's the debate that's happening. But trees are an emotive issue, and I know Broken Hill City Council, for one, has attracted quite a bit of criticism lately for tree removals in that city in New South Wales. So thank you both for those rather unique picks of the week. Mine's a little bit more sobering. I just wanted to mention Merri-bek City Council, which has declared a health emergency. We know what trees can do for air quality. In Merri-bek, they've declared an emergency because of the impacts of air and noise pollution from heavy trucks on local roads. This has been an issue for a long time. Trucks in the inner city going to the step of declaring a health emergency. I can only imagine it's like, well, what else can we do to try and move the dial on this issue and bring some more attention to it?
Yeah, I did see that, and I saw the Mayor Sarah Carter had come out and said, look, there was a heavy truck curfew on some local roads brought in some years ago, I think in 2015, after many years of community campaigning, but there's an element of sort of a lack of monitoring and enforcement that's sort of reduced the efficacy of that curfew. And the World Health Organization has come out and said, there's no safe level of exposure to these particulates that are in the air, that cause you to cough and you irritate your eyes and your nose and your throat and these sorts of things. And particular for the very young the elderly, those people with asthma. It's a really big issue in Footscray and other, parts of that Maribyrnong area are suffering, and good on Sarah Carter and council for bringing attention to this.
Absolutely. And you're right, it's been an issue, particularly in the inner west, that there's that triangle, Brimbank, Hobsons Bay, Maribyrnong, where air quality has been an issue for a long time. Legacy of an industrial past, and in some cases an industrial present, of course. So full marks to those councils for the work they're doing in that space, and hopefully they can tip the dial on it in a meaningful way. We should wrap this up. A couple of notes before we go. VLGA board elections. Catherine Arndt, the CEO there, asked me to remind folks, elected members at councils who are members of VLGA are eligible to nominate for these 2 positions for a 3-year term, and the nominations close on the 29th of May, which is Monday, if I'm not mistaken. And then there'll be an online ballot from the 1st of June. Check out VLGA Connect. Our latest episodes are attracting quite a bit of attention. The Local Leaders episode with Brent McAllister, one of our most viewed in recent times. Really interesting discussion with Brent and his background. I've got an interview there with Andrew Greaves, the Victorian Auditor General. It might be the last time we talk to Andrew, because his term is coming up to expire in a few months' time. And look out on Tuesday for our next Local Leaders, which is it's actually a quite emotional chat with Julie Williams, the mayor of Darebin. She's got a fascinating past and how she's become involved in local government. So I recommend that to you, which is dropping on Tuesday. Hopefully you're all up to date on those episodes, Julie and Tony.
We are. They are fantastic, Chris. So hats off to you. Really, when I was in my sick bed this week, it was good listening.
Excellent. Excellent. All right. Thank you both. I hope you've got a busy week ahead, and we look forward to getting your insights on another edition of TGU very soon. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Julie.
Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Chris. It's great to see you, Tony.
And thank you to our sponsors, Hunt and Hunt Lawyers. That's been another TGU in the can from VLGA Connect. Thanks for watching and listening, and we'll see you again soon.